Hello, Fran here at New Testament Explained. This video is technically the final one of this series. There is a little bit of a but, however. I've decided to do Jesus' sentencing in a separate video, so there's actually going to be I'm going to call it a bonus video 10. So if you are watching this because you are studying A Level, I'm slightly sorry that this isn't actually the last one. There is one more little one at the end. But we'll call it a bonus to make it sound more exciting. This video then is going to look at when Jesus is questioned by a high priest, and it will also involve Peter's denial. Again, we're looking at John's Gospel, his version of these events, and what we are trying to get out of these passages is why Jesus had to die and any key themes. So I'm going to be looking for those in this 9th video, not forgetting there's a bonus one. As always, there's going to be a little overview now. So the other synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark and Luke, describe the disciples running away in fear. So if you've watched the arrest, the video that's just before this one, that will make sense. They're all together and they've run away. Mark infamously mentions one of them running away naked, which is an entire different debate. But John does not include any of these details, not only the naked man, but the disciples running away full stop. The disciples just fade out of the story pretty much, except for two. Peter's going to stick around, and so is an unnamed disciple. In terms of the trial then, looking at the passage we're going to look at today, the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark and Luke, describe a full trial before the Sanhedrin with witnesses, but John describes this very briefly in a violent interrogation. It's very unofficial, off the record, and it's therefore quite different to this somewhat formal full trial in the synoptics, which raises questions as to which one is the right version of events. Now, in response to that question, which one's right, you could pick a side. You could say the synoptics are right. You could say John is right. A third answer is that you harmonise the Gospels. And what that means is you bring them together and suggest that there is an answer by which they are all correct. So, in terms of how this works then, the Gospels can be harmonised if this interrogation that John describes took place before the trial. So what you say is John's sort of account just happens before that, the one we read in the synoptics. Ellis Rivkin is a scholar, however, who argues that Jesus' trial was likely to be small, a political affair involving just a few influential people, and he would be more likely to say that John's version is right. So you can pick a side. You can say the synoptics are right. You can say John's right, which is what Ellis Rivkin does. But if you wanted, you could take the third answer, which is that maybe both accounts are right and just John's happened first. The passage can be divided into 3 sections that have their own subheadings, so I'm going to do one per slide. In Peter's first denial, there's not much of a sense of who should be held responsible for the crucifixion of Jesus, because it's just not talking about that. So I'm going to look at key themes instead. Again, there's not too much in here, to be honest. What is interesting is that both disciples, Peter and the one who's unnamed, are referred to as knowing the high priest. And the one I've highlighted is when it says the other disciple was known to the high priest. Some scholars think this is the beloved disciple who is a potential author of John's Gospel. And the reason I highlight that is, if you was analysing this passage, you could make a topic link to 3.2, which is the purpose and authorship of John. So you could kind of bring that up as evidence that perhaps the beloved disciple was the author, hence why the identity is kept unknown. And then the second bit I've highlighted is the denial itself, where Peter replies, "I am not." There's a subtle link to the theme of Christology here, because it's a reversal of an "I am" saying, whereas Jesus often says "I am," ... Peter goes "I am not." So you can make a topic link to 2.2, "I am" sayings, in that Peter's the reverse of it here. and you can also therefore make a very subtle link to Christology. In terms of this being accurate, I think many scholars would argue it is likely to be accurate because it matches the criteria of embarrassment, which again is where you would think a gospel writer would leave this detail out. It is a bit embarrassing that Peter, who is a highly significant disciple and is going to go on to be highly significant, is denying knowing Jesus. So the fact that it's mentioned not only in this gospel but in the other synoptics is a signal that it's likely to be true, because given the choice you would expect the gospel writer to have left it out. The next section of this passage is where the high priest questioned Jesus, and there's a lot more perhaps highlighted here because there's more closer links to the topic we're looking at. So this bit of the passage starts by saying, meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teachings. What's interesting here is that it's called, the way it's presented as a trial is, some would say, inaccurate. Jesus is essentially being arrested in the middle of the night and sort of ushered away to be questioned. Some would consider it kidnap. So I think this scenario in itself can be considered political expediency. It's very sort of harsh treatment given the situation. So there we've got a degree of political expediency straight away. There is start of again a bit of an inclination here that religious authorities were responsible. Moving through the passage, Jesus says, I said nothing in secret. Why question me? Ask those who heard me, which again can be a sign that Jesus is trying to like almost show his frustration, like, and the illegality of this process. Is asserting his innocence. He's saying he's done nothing wrong. I've said nothing in secret. So again, we're starting to get some sort of evidence to suggest that religious authorities may have been responsible due to this trial and maybe the questions surrounding it. Again, there's also a sense of political expedience here that Jesus now is undermining the high priest quite vocally. Why question me? Ask those who heard me. So again, it's quite aggressive. It could be considered a threat to power as well, but I think you could also put it under political expedience, especially when you couple it with the next sentence, which is where Jesus is slapped in the face. That definitely comes under political expediency. It's a very sort of harsh reaction to what Jesus has said. What is interesting here is that this detail is quite distinct to John's Gospel. Matthew, Mark and Luke, the synoptic Gospels, do describe Jesus being beaten, spat on, mocked, but they don't have this specific quote of Jesus just like being slapped. It could be John trying to convey that Jesus was like he suffered in this experience. It was quite commonly known that Jesus suffered in this instance, so he's probably trying to get that across. But again, he's trying to show Jesus as having a degree of control, as being dignified, and that could be something that suggests slightly, as we said in the earlier passage where Jesus is arrested, that Jesus has a degree of control. Maybe what John is trying to get across here is that this is part of God's plan and that he is going to suffer, but John kind of minimizes sort of the details to kind of convey that Jesus has dignity and control in this situation. The passage ends with then Annas bound him and sent him to Caiaphas, the high priest. So again, this is a continuation of Jesus being questioned and in the presence of religious authorities, the high priest, which could again be used to suggest that responsibility for what is happening lies with religious authorities. Again, though, this would need to be put into a broader context to see whether that would be your final sort of conclusion. Finally, we've got Peter's second and third denial. So again, we've got a continuation of the phrase I am not, which again you could link to the 2.2 topic, I am sayings, and kind of show that this is a reversal of what Jesus was saying. And then we get the third denial where the rooster began to crow. So in the Synoptic Gospels, Peter remembers what Jesus has said, that he's going to deny him 3 times, and he breaks down. John doesn't add these details. We don't get anything beyond verse 27 in terms of Peter realizing what he's done and remembering what Jesus said. It kind of just stops at the rooster crowing, which is interesting. There is an argument that John's gospel is more interested in the beloved disciple than Peter, but again, it does just link into the fact that John's gospel is different to the synoptics, and therefore we've got some variation that you would need to keep in mind. The only thing I'd say you need to also remember here is that Peter's denied Jesus 3 times. What will happen later at the resurrection is Jesus will ask Peter if he loves him 3 times. So whilst Peter in this moment has denied Jesus 3 times, he's almost going to be rehabilitated later on, where he sort of, I'm not sure if make up for it is the right word, but he will almost be rehabilitated by responding to the "Do you love me" 3 times instead. That then ends the discussion of this Bible passage. It's the trial where we get most discussion about responsibility and why Jesus had to die. And again, we've got a bit more of a debate in this passage as to whether religious authorities were responsible or as to whether it was part of God's plan, as echoed by the dignity and control John portrays Jesus as having. The theme of Christology comes out most in Peter's denial through the use of the I am sayings, but beyond that there are other things you can draw out in these passages. Thank you for watching, and make sure to subscribe.